you ever been so sure you were alone, only to feel a pair of eyes on you? That's what happened to me last week. I swear I'll never sleep with the closet door open again. It started innocently enough. I had moved into an old, creaky apartment downtown. The kind of place with peeling wallpaper, a faint smell of mildew, and a closet door that never stayed shut. I should have taken it as a warning, but hindsight's always clearer, isn't it? The first night was uneventful. A few strange noises here and there, the building settling, I told myself. But on the second night, I noticed something odd. The closet door, which I had definitely closed before bed, was cracked open just an inch. Enough to see the darkness inside. I chalked it up to the draft and pushed it shut again. But as I lay there in the dark, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The room was too quiet and the air felt heavy. I tried to ignore it, but just as I was drifting off, I heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible sound. Like breathing. I sat up, heart pounding. Hello? My voice was shaky, but there was no answer. Just the quiet hum of the streetlights outside and that breathing. Slow, deliberate, coming from the closet. I reached for my phone, fumbling with the flashlight. When the beam cut through the darkness, it landed on the closet door. Still closed. The breathing stopped. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was just tired, and eventually I fell into an uneasy sleep. By the third night I was on edge. I kept the closet door shut with a chair propped against it. I even stuffed a towel at the base just in case. But when I woke up around 3 a.m., the chair was tipped over, the towel pushed aside, and the closet door was wide open. The air was freezing, and that's when I saw it. Two glinting eyes, low to the ground, staring at me from the shadows of the closet. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The eyes blinked and then, it moved. A long, pale hand reached out, fingers impossibly thin and claw-like. It gripped the edge of the door frame, pulling the rest of its body into view. Its head was tilted, neck too long, as if it were trying to decide what to do with me. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. All I could do was stare as it crawled out, moving with jerky, unnatural motions. It stopped at the foot of my bed. Then it smiled. I don't know how, but I finally found my voice and screamed. The thing, whatever it was, darted back into the closet, slamming the door behind it. I didn't wait to see if it would come back. I grabbed my keys, bolted out of the apartment, and spent the rest of the night in my car. The next day I packed up everything and moved out. I didn't even care about getting my deposit back. But here's the thing. I've started noticing strange things at my new place. Small, almost unnoticeable at first. A closet door that doesn't stay shut. That heavy feeling in the air at night. And sometimes, just before I fall asleep, I swear I hear breathing. I stop looking. Whatever it is, it's always watching. And now it's not just in the closet. Whispers beneath the floorboards. Have you ever lived somewhere where the walls seemed to hold secrets? Where silence was never truly silent? That's what I found when I moved into the old house on Willow Lane. It wasn't the creaks or the groans of the aging wood that got to me. It was the whispers. The ones coming from beneath the floorboards. It was a fixer-upper, or so the real estate agent had cheerfully described it. A charming Victorian with character, though in desperate need of TLC. I moved in with high hopes, but from the first night I knew something was off. The air inside the house was stagnant, almost suffocating, and the floorboards, they seemed to hum faintly as if holding their breath. The first time I heard it, I was unpacking in the living room. A soft, almost imperceptible murmur beneath my feet. I froze, chalking it up to the old pipes or maybe the wind. But as the days went on, the murmurs grew louder, more distinct. Words I couldn't quite make out, spoken in a language I didn't recognize. By the third night I was on edge. Every time the house grew quiet, the whispers began. They seemed to come from specific spots. Beneath the sofa, under the dining table, right below my bed. It was as if they were following me. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, but the whispers grew bolder. One evening, while I was reading in the living room, the sound escalated to a low, rhythmic chant. It was hypnotic, pulling me toward the floor. I pressed my ear to the cold wooden planks and I heard it clearly. A single word repeated over and over, listen. That night I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake, listening, waiting. At around 2 a.m., the whispers started again, louder this time. They weren't just beneath the floorboards anymore. They were in the walls, the ceilings, surrounding me. Desperate for answers, I grabbed a flashlight and a crowbar. If something was under the floorboards, I had to know. I pried up the first plank in the living room, then another and another. Beneath them, the darkness seemed to writhe as if alive. I shone the flashlight into the void and froze. There, in the dirt beneath the house, were dozens of small wooden figurines. Each one carved with a face twisted in agony, mouths open as if screaming. And then I saw it, a hand. Pale, skeletal, and reaching upward. Before I could move, the hand twitched. The whispers surged, louder than ever, rising to an almost deafening roar. The words became clear now. Join us. Join us. Join us. I stumbled back, dropping the flashlight. The beam flickered and died, plunging me into darkness. The whispers didn't stop. They grew louder, more insistent. I could feel something crawling up through the gap in the floorboards, something cold and wet brushing against my ankle. I ran. I didn't bother packing anything. I bolted out of the house, not stopping until I was halfway down the street. When I finally looked back, the house seemed to shudder as if alive. The front door creaked open, and for a split second, I thought I saw shadowy figures standing in the doorway watching me. The next morning, I put the house up for sale. I didn't care about the money, I just wanted it gone. But the whispers, they followed me. At night in my new apartment, I swear I hear them. Faint but unmistakable, coming from beneath the floorboards. No matter where I go, the whispers find me. They're waiting, patient and relentless, for the moment I'll finally listen. I found a diary in the woods. It wasn't empty. It's strange, isn't it? The things we stumble upon when we least expect it. I wasn't looking for anything that day, just hiking through the woods to clear my head. But then I saw it, half buried under a pile of damp leaves, its leather cover cracked and weathered with age. A diary. Something about it called to me. I should have left it there, should have walked away. But curiosity has a way of sinking its claws in deep, doesn't it? I picked it up, brushing off the dirt and leaves. The clasp was broken, the pages yellowed and warped from moisture. But when I opened it, I realized the strange part wasn't how it looked. It was what was written inside, or rather what wasn't. The first few pages were blank, but as I flipped through, I noticed writing beginning to appear, as if someone were jotting down notes right in front of me. It wasn't my imagination. I saw the ink bloom on the page, words forming in jagged, hurried script. You shouldn't have opened this. I snapped it shut, heart pounding, but something compelled me to open it again. The pages that had been blank before now held more writing. Descriptions of me standing in the woods, holding the diary. My red jacket. My trembling hands. The way my breath fogged in the cold air. And then it changed. The diary began to tell me things I hadn't even noticed yet. Don't turn around, it read. You're not alone. I froze. The air seemed to thicken around me. Slowly, against every instinct screaming at me not to, I turned. There was no one there. Just the silent forest and the faint rustling of leaves. But when I looked back at the diary, the words had changed again. It's watching. I slammed it shut and started walking back the way I came, but the forest seemed unfamiliar now. The trees leaned closer, their gnarled branches clawing at the sky. And the diary, it was hot in my hands, almost burning, but I couldn't let it go. Every time I tried, my fingers tightened around it as if it were part of me. I finally made it back to my car, panting and shaking. I threw the diary onto the passenger seat and sped home, vowing to burn it. But when I got there, it was gone. Not in the car, not on the driveway. Just gone. That night, I heard scratching at my bedroom window. When I looked, there was nothing there, just the dark outline of the trees against the moonlit sky. But on my bedside table, where I was sure there had been nothing before, sat the diary. Its cover pristine, its clasp intact. I opened it one last time. The first page now held a single line written in neat, deliberate handwriting. You can't get rid of me. I haven't touched it since, but I know it's waiting. And sometimes when the house is quiet, I swear I hear pages turning. The shadow that followed me home. It started as a faint sense of unease, The kind you feel when someone's eyes are boring into the back of your head. But there was no one there. At least no one I could see. It wasn't until I got home that I realized something had followed me. The night had been quiet, too quiet. I was walking back from the park, the usual shortcut I'd taken 100 times before. The streetlights flickered as I passed under them, one by one. I shrugged it off as a coincidence, but my footsteps felt echoed. I turned around, expecting to see someone. Nothing. Just the empty sidewalk and the faint hum of the wind. Still, the feeling didn't leave. If anything, it grew stronger. By the time I reached my front door, my hands were shaking so badly I struggled to get the key in the lock. Once inside, I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, trying to calm down. That's when I noticed it. A shadow, longer and darker than it should have been, stretching across the living room wall. But there was no one there to cast it. At first, I told myself it was a trick of the light. Maybe the headlights of a passing car or the branches swaying outside. But the shadow moved. Slowly, deliberately. It slid across the wall like oil, creeping closer to where I stood. I backed away, my breath hitching. "Who's there?" My voice sounded small, almost childlike. No response, just the faint rustle of something. It wasn't the wind. It was inside the house. The shadow shifted again, pooling at my feet. And then it began to rise. It stretched upward, forming the outline of something humanoid but wrong. Its limbs were too long, its head tilted unnaturally to the side. Empty sockets stared at me where eyes should have been, and a mouth that wasn't really a mouth twisted into a grin. "You brought me here," it whispered, though its lips never moved. I bolted upstairs, slamming the bedroom door behind me. My mind raced as I tried to figure out what to do. Call someone? Who would believe me? Fight it? How do you fight something that isn't even solid? The lights flickered, and then they went out entirely. The room was plunged into darkness, but I could feel it there with me. Its presence was suffocating, pressing down on my chest like a weight. "Why me?" I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Its voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "You noticed me. That's all it takes." I don't remember much after that. Just the feeling of cold hands wrapping around my wrists, pulling me down into the darkness. When I woke up, the shadow was gone. Or at least I thought it was. But now, every mirror in my house shows a figure standing behind me, just out of reach. Watching. Waiting.
Don't answer the door at 3:33 a.m. Have you ever felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as though something unseen was watching you? That's exactly how it began for me. It was a quiet, uneventful night. I had just fallen asleep in my small suburban home, the kind of place where nothing ever happens. The digital clock on my nightstand glowed an unsettling 3:33 a.m. when I was jolted awake by a faint knock at the front door. At first I thought I had imagined it, but the knock came again, louder this time. I sat up, my heart pounding. Who would come to my door at this hour? My neighborhood was silent, the streets empty under the dim glow of the streetlights. The knock came once more, insistent and echoing through the stillness of the house. I hesitated, the air suddenly feeling heavy. Slowly, I slipped out of bed and tiptoed toward the front door. Each step felt like an eternity. The knocking had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. Peeking through the peephole, my breath hitched. There was no one there. Trying to shake off the unease, I double-checked the locks and turned to head back to bed. But just as I reached the hallway, the knock came again, this time so loud it rattled the door on its hinges. I froze, my body paralyzed with fear. Summoning every ounce of courage, I called out, "Who's there?" No response. Only silence. I wanted to open the door, but something deep inside me screamed not to. Instead, I grabbed my phone and dialed the police. As I waited for them to arrive, a new sound filled the room, faint whispers coming from the other side of the door. They were low, guttural, and in no language I could recognize. My hands trembled as I backed away, locking myself in the bathroom. When the police arrived, they found nothing. No footprints, no signs of anyone having been there. It was as though the knocking, the whispers, had all been in my head. But I knew better. When I returned to the front door after the officers left, my blood ran cold. Scratched into the wood were 3 chilling words. "Don't open again." I moved out the very next week, but the terror didn't end there. Every night since, no matter where I've been, I've woken up at 3:33 a.m., always to the faint sound of knocking. If you're new here, don't miss out on more spine-tingling stories. Hit that subscribe button to join our growing community of thrill seekers. Got a creepy experience of your own? Send it to spooksandstories@gmail.com for a chance to have your story featured on the channel. Let's keep the scares coming, we're dying to hear from you.